Who are you wasting my money on this pile of junk for, Mother? For that girl? Stephen's voice, my son's voice, was sharp as a knife, slicing through the suffocatingly quiet air of his living room. He was waving the bill around like some kind of indictment. She's a failure. You need to learn to live without my money. The dry, final sound of scissors cutting through plastic came right after, a sentence that had just been carried out. My name is Patricia. I'm a 72-year-old retired accountant, and in that moment, I felt as shattered as the plastic shards scattered across his perfect oak floor. But what my arrogant son didn't know was that he hadn't cut a leash. He had personally handed me the key to my own cage. So pull up a chair and let me tell you exactly how his cruel words became the catalyst for the most satisfying settlement of my life. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon, the most forgettable day of the week, but it turned into the day that would define the rest of my life. I was sitting in the leather armchair Stephen, my son, always bragged about to his guests. It was a cold, stiff chair, just like the man himself. The air in this huge living room always had that artificial smell of lemon polish and emotional distance. Everything was polished to perfection, from the oak floors to the family photos that didn't have a single genuine smile in them. This was Stephen's kingdom, and I was just an old piece of furniture he allowed to exist in it. Stephen stormed into the room like a hurricane, but he wasn't holding his usual briefcase or car keys. In his hand was a flimsy bill, but he wielded it like a weapon. "What is this, Mother?" he hissed, his voice like broken glass. I didn't even need to look. I knew what it was. The credit card statement. The bill for the electric vehicle diagnostic toolkit I'd ordered last week. I answered calmly, my voice even. "It's something I needed." "You needed?" Stephen scoffed, a nasty sound that echoed in the silence of the house. "Who did you buy this for? For that girl?" That girl. Those two words felt like a knife in my chest. He wouldn't even use his own daughter's name. Lily, my granddaughter, the child he'd thrown out of the house 7 years ago just because she dared to have a dream that was different from the one he'd mapped out for her. "I told you to stop talking to her," Stephen roared, his face turning red with rage. "She's a disappointment. What kind of future is there for a girl who wants to be a mechanic? And you're wasting my money on this useless junk to humor her." "It's not your money, Stephen," I said softly, but a fire was starting to build in my chest. "It's my pension." "Your pension?" He burst out laughing, this time with undisguised contempt. "How far does that little bit of money go compared to what it costs for you to live in this house? Who pays the electricity, the water, the food? Who gives you a roof over your head?" He stepped closer, leaning down to look at me, his eyes as cold as ice. I do all of it, so it is my money." He pulled out his thick wallet and took out the supplementary credit card he'd given me. I once thought it was a connection, but now I realized it was a leash. "You need to learn to live without my money." Snip. The sound of the scissors slicing through plastic was sharp and dry. Once. Twice. The silver and blue fragments of the credit card fluttered down to the glossy oak floor. They lay there, twisted and useless, just like my self-respect had been for all those years. Stephen tossed the scissors onto the coffee table with a harsh clang. He jutted out his chin, convinced he had taught me a lesson, reminded me of my place. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the pieces. For a long moment, I just sat there, frozen. The pain, the humiliation, it all rose in my throat, but not a single tear fell. I'd cried too much already. I cried when my husband died. I cried the first time Stephen looked down on me. I cried when he threw Lily out the door on a pouring rainy night. My tears had run dry a long time ago. I slowly bent down, my knees crackling in protest. My old hands, with their worn-out knuckles, carefully picked up each sharp-edged piece of plastic. I didn't see them as a symbol of loss, no. As my fingertips touched their sharp edges, a cold, crystal-clear feeling spread through my entire body. I am a retired accountant. My whole life has been about numbers, about debits and credits. I know when an account has become a liability, when it's time to cut your losses and close the books. Straightening up, I clenched the plastic shards in my palm. They dug into my skin, a small but real pain. And in that pain, I made a decision. Stephen was right. It was time for me to learn to live without his money. But more importantly, it was time for him to learn what happens when this family's true legacy is passed on to the person who actually deserves it. That night in the guest room Stephen had so generously given me, I didn't sleep a wink. I was closing the books on an account named The Sacrifice and Silence of Patricia. Memory is a strange thing. Sometimes it's as hazy as the morning fog in Portland, but some memories stay sharp as a shard of glass, even after 7 years. My husband, David, Stephen's father, was a wonderful man. He wasn't a flashy businessman. He was a carpenter, a woodworker, an artisan with golden hands. I fell in love with those calloused, skillful hands. Stephen grew up watching his father come home every evening with his clothes covered in sawdust and smelling of warm pine. He loved his father, but I knew, deep down, he also hated that image. He swore to himself he'd never live a blue-collar life like that. He would be the boss, the man in the air-conditioned office, the one giving orders with his words, not with his labor. Stephen's entire career, his whole flashy car dealership, was built on rejecting his father's legacy. And then came Lily. She had her grandmother's eyes, but she had her grandfather David's hands and his soul. I remember the night Stephen threw her out like it was yesterday. She had just turned 18, her eyes burning with fire, and her hands always smudged with grease from her passion for mechanics. She'd received a full scholarship to one of the best automotive technical schools in the country, a place she'd dreamed of since she was a little girl building model cars. A mechanic? Stephen had screamed in the dining room that day, his face purple. A disgrace! My daughter is going to college to become a lawyer or a doctor, not to be crawling around under cars. But it's my dream, Dad, Lily had argued back, her voice trembling but firm. I'm good at this. I love it. Grandpa would be so proud of me. That was the line that lit the fuse. Don't you dare mention him. Stephen slammed his hand on the table, sending dishes rattling. I have spent my entire life getting away from that world of sawdust and grease. I built all of this so my children wouldn't have to come home with calloused hands and smelly clothes like he did. And you, he pointed his finger at Lily, you want to throw it all away to go back to that life? You're choosing his side, aren't you? It wasn't an argument about a career anymore. In Stephen's twisted mind, it was an accusation, a betrayal. When Lily, with all the pride of youth, shot back, if that's what you think, then yes, Stephen just pointed to the door. Then go walk that path. If you set foot in that school, don't you ever call me Dad again. You can fend for yourself. And Lily, with that same youthful pride, did just that. She grabbed her backpack and left that very night with only a few $100s in her pocket and a heart that was broken but unbowed. I found her 2 days later at a little diner on the outskirts of town where she was washing dishes to get by. Her eyes were swollen but dry. She wouldn't cry in front of me. We sat across from each other in a worn-out red vinyl booth, not saying a word for a long time. Then I reached out and took her calloused hand. I'm here, I said, and I will never, ever leave you. She collapsed into my arms and just sobbed. She kept asking why her dad would be so against it when he did the same kind of work. From the very beginning, I knew I couldn't just give her money. That would just trade one dependency for another. Stephen had taken away her emotional support. I had to give her the tools to build her own independence. I didn't know a thing about internal combustion engines or drivetrains, but I knew about business plans, cash flow, and how to turn an idea into a sustainable enterprise. "We're not just going to get you through school, Lily," I told her in that diner, my voice firm. "We are going to build something of your own, something no one can ever take away from you." The next 7 years were a masterclass in secrets and relentless effort. By day, I was the harmless old mother living in Stephen's house, playing by his ridiculous rules. But by night, when the house was asleep, I became a strategist. I opened a separate bank account that Stephen knew nothing about. My entire pension, the dividends from the small investments my husband had left me, I funneled it all in there. I lived as frugally as possible so that every spare dollar could be sent toward a greater purpose. We had weekly video calls. I watched Lily grow up through a computer screen. From a nervous freshman, she blossomed into a skilled technician, then a master diagnostician who was top of her class. She didn't just study, she lived and breathed those machines. Using my accounting skills, I mapped out a 5-year plan. We weren't just aiming to open a regular repair shop. I'd done my market research. Lily had told me she saw the coming wave of electric vehicles. That was the future, a future that smug men like Stephen would never see until it was washing over them. "We're going to get ahead of the curve, Lily," I told her over the phone, my voice buzzing with excitement. "We'll specialize in EVs and custom mods. We'll be the best, the most modern." The name Lily's Custom and Electric was born on a night just like that. It wasn't just a name, it was a declaration of ownership, of a legacy passed to the rightful heir. When Lily graduated with top honors, we put our plan into motion. I secretly used my funds to put a down payment on an old warehouse on the other side of town, a prime spot near the new industrial park. We spent the next 2 years renovating it, brick by brick, wire by wire. Lily designed the entire workshop layout herself, while I handled suppliers, negotiated contracts, and set up the accounting systems. Those were exhausting but hopeful days. Every time Stephen would grumble about a $20 grocery bill, I'd just smile and nod. He had no idea that right under his nose, I was funding the creation of a small empire, an empire born from his own arrogance. While we were quietly building, Stephen's kingdom was beginning to show cracks. His dealership, Stephen Select Autos, was a museum of the past. He still believed that gas-guzzling muscle cars were the pinnacle of the automotive world. I started noticing the signs. Tense phone calls with the bank he'd try to whisper when I walked by. Evenings when he'd come home scowling, smelling of whiskey. The sales numbers on the whiteboard in his office were dwindling. The turning point came about 6 months before the credit card incident. Aero Logistics, a major shipping company and Stephen's biggest maintenance client for a decade, announced they were converting their entire fleet to electric vehicles. They terminated their contract with Stephen. I overheard him on the phone that night. His voice had lost its usual arrogance. It was filled with unconcealed panic. "How am I supposed to upgrade? The bank won't give me another loan. They said my business model is obsolete." I stood hidden behind the door, my heart feeling not a shred of pity. I saw the plain truth. Stephen wasn't being beaten by a competitor. He was being beaten by his own short-sightedness. He had scoffed at the future, and now the future was coming to collect. He became more irritable, more controlling. Cutting up my credit card wasn't a random act. It was the act of a drowning man, grasping at anything he could control to feel like he still had power. But he had chosen the wrong person to exercise his power over. That night, after I'd picked up the broken pieces of the card, I called Lily. "Is everything ready to go?" I asked, my voice strangely calm. "Aye, aye, Captain. Just waiting on your order." Her voice came back, teasing and full of love. "Systems are online. The crew is ready. We can have our grand opening next week." I took a deep breath. Good. It's time to launch. I hung up and looked out the window. The Portland night was dark and still. A storm was coming for Stephen. But for Lily and me, the sky was clear and wide open. We had built our own ship, and it was ready to set sail. A month after the credit card was cut to pieces, the Portland sky was unusually clear, as if nature itself wanted to celebrate with us. It was the grand opening of Lily's Custom and Electric. I stood quietly in a corner of the glass-walled office, looking out at the sprawling lot in front. This was no longer an old, forgotten warehouse. It had been reborn. Everything was gleaming, clean, and efficient. It didn't have that smell of cold grease and metal that Stephen always complained about. It smelled of new paint, polished concrete, and something fresh and vital, the smell of the future. We didn't have a lot of guests, but they were the right people. Representatives from EV parts suppliers, a few local business owners, and most importantly, the vice president of Aero Logistics, a Mr. Miller, whom Lily had deeply impressed at a tech seminar a few months back. My Lily. She stood in the middle of the workshop, not in a fancy dress, but in a clean, perfectly tailored navy blue mechanic's uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, showing off her intelligent brow. She didn't say much, but when she spoke about solid-state battery systems or energy management software, her eyes lit up with a passion that could illuminate the entire room. She wasn't showing off, she was sharing knowledge, and everyone was listening, captivated. I looked at my granddaughter, and my heart, this old heart I thought had grown tough, swelled with an overwhelming pride. This wasn't just a garage, it was a fortress built on Lily's resilience and my quiet calculations. Every hydraulic lift, every tool set, every line of code on the computers, it was all paid for with the money Stephen had called useless junk. At the end of the event, I saw Lily and Mr. Miller shake hands. The beaming smile on Lily's face told me everything. The contract was signed. They were now the exclusive service partner for the entire Aero Logistics electric fleet. It was the cornerstone, the guarantee for our future. When everyone had left, Lily walked over to me, still holding the pen she'd used to sign the contract. She wrapped me in a huge hug, a hug that smelled of clean machine oil and determination. "We did it, Grandma," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I patted her on the back. "Not we did it," I corrected her. "This is just the beginning, and you are going to go so much further." While we were just beginning, Stephen was nearing his end. His downfall wasn't loud and dramatic. It happened in the dreadful silence of unpaid bills and phones that stopped ringing. I was still living in his house, a ghost observing the decay. He no longer came home with a smug look on his face. He'd return with slumped shoulders, a jaw full of stubble he couldn't be bothered to shave, and a shirt so wrinkled it looked like he'd balled it up in a fit of rage. The house no longer smelled of lemon polish. It smelled of stale coffee and sour anxiety. One evening, he found me in the kitchen where I was reading a book. It was the first time in weeks he'd spoken to me about something other than a command or a complaint. "Mom," he started, his voice hesitant. He couldn't look me in the eye. I'm in a little trouble." I placed my book down, carefully marking my page. "What kind of trouble, Stephen?" "The business," he mumbled. "The market's changing. I need a loan to pivot, to upgrade." He looked up then, and I saw the desperation in his eyes. "Mom, I need a loan." A loan? From me? The mother he had humiliated? Whose small lifeline he had cut over a toolkit? I almost laughed, but I held it back. A good accountant never lets emotion interfere with the numbers. I asked in a professional tone, "What's your business plan, Stephen? What would you use the money for? What's the projected return on investment? What assets do you have for collateral?" He was stunned, completely unprepared for those questions. He thought I was just some senile old woman who'd open her purse after a few sweet words. "What are you talking about? I'm your son. We're family." Family also requires trust and a solid plan, Stephen, I replied, my voice still perfectly level. From what I can see, your business model is obsolete. Investing in it now would be like throwing good money after bad. The desperation in his eyes turned to anger. So you're not going to help me? You'd rather see me go bankrupt? I stood up, walked to the sink, and placed my teacup inside. I turned back to face him, looking him straight in the eye this time. I have spent my entire life investing in you, Stephen. I invested my time, my love, and every dollar I had. But every investment needs to show a return. You haven't brought any returns, only emotional losses. I'm sorry, Stephen, but the Bank of Mom is closed to high-risk investments. He just stared at me, unable to believe what he was hearing. Then he spun around, stormed out of the kitchen, and slammed the door. I heard his car roar to life and speed off into the night. I didn't feel guilty. I just felt a cold, calm peace. I wasn't pushing him down. I was simply refusing to hold him up while he dragged himself under. Stephen didn't find us right away. He was too busy scrambling, begging old friends and business partners, but all he got were headshakes and polite refusals. His kingdom had been isolated. He found out the way arrogant men often do, through a rumor. He was sitting in some cheap bar, trying to talk an old acquaintance into a loan, and the man, probably just wanting to end the conversation, said, "Hey, Stephen, why don't you talk to that new garage that opened up in the industrial park? I heard they just landed the Aero Logistics contract. They're the only shop in the region that can handle those EVs. Maybe they need a used car partner." Doubt, then a flicker of hope, and then curiosity must have dawned on Stephen. He must have mumbled the name the man said, Lily's Custom and Electric. That name, it must have sounded familiar, but his ego would have stopped him from connecting the dots. He would have told himself it was just a coincidence. That night, I know he looked it up online. I didn't need to be there to see him sitting in front of his computer, typing the name into the search bar. I can picture the shock on his face when the website loaded. Seeing the logo, a stylized lightning bolt inside a lily flower. Seeing the photos of a modern, gleaming garage. And then, under the Our Team section, he would have seen it. A picture of Lily. She was smiling, arms crossed, standing next to an electric car on a lift. She looked strong, confident, and like a total stranger. And right below her picture, under the title Investor and Strategic Advisor, he would have seen another photo, a photo of me. The shock, the denial, and then the impotent rage. The entire story would have clicked into place in his head. The toolkit, my whispered phone calls, my unnerving calmness, it all made sense. He wasn't being beaten by the market. He had been outmaneuvered by the very people he had scorned. The next day, he didn't go to work. I heard him pacing upstairs like a caged animal. Around noon, he came down, dressed in an old suit, his face gaunt. He didn't say a word to me, just grabbed his car keys and left. I watched from the window as his car slowly pulled out of the driveway. I knew where he was going. It wasn't a business trip. It was a pilgrimage of shame. He was going to the fortress we had built, not as a conqueror, but as a beggar. When Stephen pulled his old sedan into the parking lot of Lily's Custom and Electric, he must have felt like he'd stepped into another world. There was nothing temporary or new about the place. Everything was deliberate, from the neat rows of green shrubs lining the lot to the steel and glass architecture of the main building. A few high-end EVs were plugged into the fast charging stations. The entire place screamed success and efficiency. He walked into the reception area, a bright, open space with natural light and a small coffee bar for customers. He must have felt terribly out of place in his wrinkled suit. Lily was waiting. She didn't go out to meet him. She let the receptionist lead him past the display of high-performance parts, past the glass wall where he could see technicians working professionally in a workshop as clean as a laboratory. Finally, he was shown into Lily's office. I was already there, sitting in a comfortable chair next to my granddaughter's desk. The office had one wall made entirely of glass, offering a commanding view of the whole workshop floor. It was a position of power, of control. Stephen walked in, looking small and defeated. He looked at Lily, who stood behind her desk, arms crossed. She was no longer the 18-year-old girl he'd kicked out. She was a queen in her own kingdom. Then his eyes shifted to me, and his gaze was a mixture of rage, shame, and one last desperate flicker of hope. "You two? You did all this behind my back?" he started, his voice hoarse. "Not behind your back, Stephen," Lily replied, her voice cool and clear. "We did it right in front of your face. You just refused to see it." Stephen tried to regain some of his old pride. He cleared his throat, trying to sound like a businessman. "Look, I know you got the Aero Logistics contract. I came here to offer a partnership. My dealership has the sales network. Your shop has the tech. We could—" "No," I cut him off, my voice soft but firm. Stephen turned to me, stunned. "We don't partner with failing business models, Stephen. That's a basic principle." "But furthermore," I continued, "our business model is about looking forward, not clinging to the past. Your dealership is the past." Stephen's mask shattered. The false pride vanished, leaving only the raw, naked fear. "Mom," he practically yelled, his voice cracking. "You can't do this to me. I'm about to lose everything, the house, the business." He took a step forward, almost falling to his knees beside my chair. "Please, Mom, I'm your son. You can't let me end up on the street. I'm begging you, loan me the money. Any amount. I'll do anything." He was crying. Tears of helplessness and self-pity streamed down his unshaven face. This was the moment I had waited for. The moment the arrogant man was brought low. But looking at him now, I didn't feel triumph. I just felt a hollow emptiness, a deep, weary fatigue. This drama needed to end. I glanced at Lily. She gave a slight, firm nod. Her eyes were steady. She was leaving the final decision to me. I looked down at my pleading son. I saw him not with the eyes of a mother, but with the eyes of an accountant making the final entry to close a ledger. "You're right," I began. "You taught me that I had to learn to live without your money. Now, I'm going to give you a chance to learn how to live." Stephen looked up, a sliver of hope in his tear-filled eyes. "We will not loan you money," I stated clearly, "and we will not partner with you, but we will make you an offer." I took a breath. "We will buy out Stevens Select Autos. Our lawyer will work with your bank. We will pay off all your business debts. You will walk away with nothing in your pocket, but you will also walk away with zero debt. You will be free of that burden." Stephen was stunned, his mouth hanging open. I continued, my voice devoid of emotion. "And out of basic human decency, Lily has an open position here." I paused, letting the words sink in. "An entry-level sales trainee, minimum wage plus commission on every car you sell. You will be required to take all the EV training courses like every other new hire, and you will report directly to Lily's sales manager." Silence filled the room. Stephen looked from me to Lily, his face a canvas of vibrant internal conflict, humiliation, or complete and utter ruin. "Take it or leave it," I finished. "The choice is yours." I looked deep into his eyes, and the mother in me hoped he could still see the right path, still become a better man. "Your father, David, he always believed that there's no shame in honest work. He built our life with his own two calloused hands. Maybe, Stephen, it's time you learned that lesson from the ground up." That last part seemed to be the final hammer blow that shattered his resistance. It wasn't just a business offer. It was a judgment on his entire life, a life built on rejection. He hung his head, his broad shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Months later, I sat in that same office, sipping chamomile tea and looking out the window. The old peeling sign for Stevens Select Autos was long gone. In its place was a gleaming new one, Lily's Custom and Electric Sales and Service Center. We had turned his old dealership into our new showroom. And down on that showroom floor, among the silent, powerful electric cars, was Stephen. He had taken the offer. He'd had no other choice. He wore the company's navy blue uniform, his name tag reading simply Stephen. He looked 10 years older. He had to learn everything from scratch, from the very basics, under the guidance of a sales manager half his age. Every day, he had to watch his daughter walk past, giving directions, solving problems he could never comprehend. His punishment wasn't poverty. He had a job, a roof over his head. He had to rent a small apartment. His punishment was the long, quiet lesson he was forced to learn every single day. The world had moved on, and he had been left behind by the very people he tried to hold down. Lily walked into the room, placing a stack of papers on the desk. She had grown into a true businesswoman, sharp and decisive, but with a warmth that never left her eyes. "First quarter reports from the showroom, Madam Advisor," she teased. "Profits are 30% above projection." I smiled. "I told you, the numbers never lie." We stood together for a moment, looking down at the showroom floor. Stephen was talking to a young couple, mechanically reciting facts about battery range and charging times. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the simple weariness of a man doing a job. I didn't live in his house anymore. I had my own comfortable little apartment built right above the garage, where I could smell coffee in the morning and hear the quiet hum of electric motors during the day. I wasn't lonely. I was surrounded by a community we had built, a legacy that was growing every day. I thought about what Stephen had said, the words that started it all. Learn to live without my money. Well, I did, but I did so much more than that. I used his contempt as the foundation to build a future. I liquidated a bad debt and invested in a priceless asset. I looked at Lily, my granddaughter, my partner. She was looking back at me, smiling. And I realized something. Legacy isn't what you leave for people. It's what you build with them. And ours, well, ours was just getting started.